A shepherd lived alone for many years on a vast piece of land, day after day, only hearing the whispers of the wind and grass beside him. But one morning, as the first light of dawn appeared, he saw a frail, naked figure kneeling at the gates of his farm. The girl, nameless and homeless, only had the sound of her muffled sobs in the stillness of the air. Was she running away, or simply seeking help? And what would the man, so accustomed to living alone, do when a strange being appeared before him, stirring emotions he had long buried? This story is not merely a chance encounter. It is a journey of two souls finding each other amidst loneliness and past wounds. Join us as we explore this poignant tale, where old pains are healed and humanity is reignited. When the man stood on the vast land, his eyes gazing at the wide sky, perhaps he never imagined that the solitude he had lived for so many years could be changed by just a fleeting glance. As a shepherd living in the desert, he was used to being alone, with endless, lonely hours and long, drawn-out nights with no one to share them with. What he called home was not the four solid walls or the people surrounding him, but simply a livestock pen, a small, humble room, and the sounds of nature around him. What he knew of the world beyond was only the stories of passing travelers, others' lives that never touched his own. He lived with what he had, asking no questions, making no demands, as if his existence were merely a part of the quiet rhythm of the land. Yet all that he knew of lonely life was suddenly overturned one peaceful morning when a woman nameless, without status, appeared at the gates of his farm. It was an image that seemed to step right out of shattered dreams, an unadorned, frail girl, her eyes red from crying, standing before him like a lost creature in this vast world. She said nothing, only stood there, crying, as though searching for shelter, a glimmer of hope in the darkness she had just fled. Perhaps for the first time in the many years he had lived alone, he felt he had to do something, not just because the girl needed help, but because in her eyes he saw a part of himself. The man was not a stranger to hardship. He was the picture of those strong men who carry invisible wounds, scars that time could not heal. His life had been a long series of days, without friends, without family, just work and responsibility toward the land, the livestock, and things society deemed as life that no one really cared about. He wasn't one to open his heart easily, nor one to seek connection or love. He had grown tired of losing important people, and that pain of loss had forced him to live in isolation. But that was precisely why this girl, with her weakness and wounds, could awaken emotions he had long hidden. It was clear that, though his life seemed safe in solitude, he lacked the most important thing a human needs to truly live: a connection to others. Solitude is not always a choice. Sometimes, it is the result of profound loss and deep pain. And in that pain, he had wrapped himself in a hard shell, convincing himself that he could live without anyone else. But as soon as the girl appeared, he realized he was wrong, that deep down, people cannot live alone forever. We need each other not just to survive, but to truly exist, to feel life through connections, whether brief or eternal. In my view, this story is a powerful reminder that sometimes, in those seemingly unexpected and unpredictable moments, we find the most important things in life. The man in this story, like many of us, had cut himself off from the world because of pain, because of disappointment. But it was in that unanticipated moment, when he faced another person who could not help him with material things or money, but emotionally, by simply being there, that he began to see the value of sharing. It is these kinds of connections that make life truly real, making us no longer feel alone, enabling us to continue on our paths. The girl's appearance was a turning point, not only for him but also for her. For in a world full of darkness and complexity, sometimes one does not need to search far to find salvation. It could be as simple as a chance meeting, a small act of help, but one that has a profound impact, changing a whole life. This girl, despite her frailty and suffering, brought an opportunity for the lonely man to heal wounds that had lasted for years. Looking at this from my perspective, the story is not just about saving another person, but about the journey to rediscover oneself through emotional connections. It's a reminder of humanity, even in the hardest of circumstances, and that no matter how harsh life gets, we can always find salvation in the simplest of actions. When the man, who had always been alone, saw the strange girl crying at the gates of his farm, a strange feeling arose in him. It wasn't fear or astonishment, but confusion, as though he had just encountered something he could not explain. His years of solitude had made him forget the feeling of facing another person, someone real, not a fleeting shadow in his memory or a message through a window. And now, the appearance of this girl, though just a small moment in his life, felt like an unexpected storm, tearing apart the shell he had created to protect himself from all harm. Naturally, he did not leave. Unlike others who merely stopped to look but did nothing, he couldn't ignore her. It was a clear contradiction within him, for before, he had been used to living his way, doing everything alone, taking care of himself without needing help. Yet, when faced with this girl, he realized something important. No matter how strong a person may be, sometimes they need help from others. This girl, with her frail body and soul seemingly crushed, was a reminder to him of the deep wounds he carried in his own heart. It was she, with her pain and helplessness, who awakened feelings he had long buried. Perhaps, at that moment, he didn't think much about how to help her. All he needed to do was not walk away, not turn his back. And then, he walked closer, his steps heavy on the ground. The girl continued crying, but she said nothing. The look in her eyes was that of someone so desperate, so hopeless, that she no longer trusted anyone in this world. It was a look that made his heart ache. A stranger, in her weakest moment, could reflect his own loneliness, his own wounds, things he had never shared with anyone, not even in his dreams. The silence between them was the strangest part. The girl didn't ask him for help, didn't seek pity. She was simply a person facing her despair, falling into her own abyss. But in that moment, the man felt he could not let her suffer alone anymore. And when he reached out his hand, a small but powerful gesture, it was as though he was beginning to open his heart, to accept that he could not live in isolation forever. When he helped her up, no words were spoken. They simply looked at each other. And in that gaze, there was a silent empathy that no words could ever describe. The girl was not someone who needed saving, but someone he could not ignore. They didn't need to share their stories or explain why she was there, why she was crying. What they needed was each other's presence, simple as that. And in that moment, this meeting was not just a physical salvation, but a spiritual one. Both, perhaps still strangers to each other, needed someone to stay, needed someone to help them overcome the pain no one else could see. From my perspective, in that moment, not only did the girl begin her journey to healing, but so did the man. He wasn't just saving the girl from her suffering. He was saving his own soul from the loneliness that had consumed him for years. In fact, this meeting was not just a coincidence, but a necessity, a connection between two people, two broken hearts that found each other at the right time. This is something we sometimes fail to realize. Those moments that seem insignificant can actually change the course of a life. And in this meeting, they didn't just save each other physically, but helped each other find parts of themselves they had lost. This story is not just about helping another person. It's about learning to open your heart, learning to recognize that we cannot live only with what we have. Sometimes, in this life, the emotional connections between people are the most important thing. They help us move forward and not drown in loneliness or pain. It's through these moments of helping each other that we also learn to heal ourselves. After the girl was helped by the man, both entered a strange, silent space, not one of awkwardness, but one of a miraculous connection. as if they were speaking to each other with emotions that needed no words. His help, though only a small gesture, changed her entire world. She was no longer a lonely ghost, lost in an indifferent world. But what was more significant was that the man himself did not realize that in this act of helping, he was opening the door to his own soul. He, who had shut his heart for so long, had broken that shell, not because of her, but for himself. They didn't rush to speak, didn't need to explain why she was there, or why he was helping. Their relationship began with unspoken questions and looks that may seem meaningless, but were full of understanding. That silence wasn't a gap between them. It was the invisible thread that connected them. It was this silence that made them not rush to understand each other, but instead gave each other space to exist and grow. The girl, once a complete stranger, gradually became a part of the man's world, and he, with a heart once closed, not thinking he could do anything but continue living alone, began to realize something simple. People cannot live forever in solitude. The girl's appearance was a powerful awakening. He didn't help her out of pity or obligation. He helped her because in her eyes, he saw a part of himself, a part that had been forgotten, that had been wounded. He saw the loneliness, the pain, and then realized that he, too, couldn't live forever behind the walls of his meaningless strength. The girl, despite being weak and wounded, had a strength the man had never realized. Her need to exist, her survival, awakened in him a feeling that not only did she need saving, but he did too. With a soul that seemed deadened, he also needed help, needed to be saved from continuing to live in the shell of loneliness. Their world wasn't about lessons or advice, but about simple moments sitting silently at dinner, walking together on a dirt road, hearing the sounds of nature around them. It was through this simplicity that they began to understand each other, not through words, but through unspoken emotions. Their relationship, perhaps, was not one of romance or grand promises, but one of genuine and deep connection. They began to rebuild what had been broken, not because they needed each other, but because they knew life couldn't be a solitary journey. Through living together, they gradually became an inseparable part of each other, not because of the need to save one another, but because they had accepted and understood each other's weaknesses. What makes this relationship special is that it's not an idealized relationship that people often envision, full of expectations and hope. Instead, it is a natural bond, born out of deep understanding and empathy. The man didn't seek someone to save him, and the girl didn't seek someone to escape her life. They met, not to find a salvation for each other's pain, but to face together the weaknesses, the wounds they had long tried to bury. And through this, they found healing not from words, but from the small actions of everyday life. What stands out in this story is that their relationship, though not love in the conventional sense, is a real and profound affection. There's no boasting, no grand promises, just each other's presence and a willingness to accept what the other brings. It's a genuine connection, a connection we often only realize the value of after losing something important in life. In this story, the setting is not just a place, but a silent character, enveloping and influencing the events and people in the tale. The vast, barren land, full of dust and wind, is not just the man's home. It is a symbol of his loneliness, his isolation, and the invisible pains he carries within. With the girl's appearance, this setting slowly transforms, reflecting the changes in their relationship and the deep emotions they are experiencing. The scenery of the farm, with its rolling hills and vast sky, creates a space both expansive and cold, much like the life the man had chosen not. He had created an invisible wall around his life, refusing anyone entry, out of fear and the deep wounds he had carried for years. This land, though vast and firm, could not hide the emptiness he felt inside. He lived with it, so accustomed to solitude that he never considered the possibility that one day he would need connection, that he would need someone to share with. When the girl arrived, Their story was not just about people, but also about the land they inhabited. The girl didn't just come to seek physical salvation. She came as an emotional outburst, a powerful force that changed everything around her. The vast land no longer represented separation, no longer a place to run away, but slowly became a space that could hold both pain and hope. This fragile girl, with her simple presence, brought strength to herself and to the lonely man. The symbolism of the land is also symbolic of acceptance. For years, the man could not accept himself, could not forgive the wounds of the past. He had lived in denial, trying to escape the truth, unwilling to face his emotions. But when the girl appeared, he was forced to confront not just her, but everything he had denied for so long. And the vast, dry land was no longer a place to escape, but where he could face the truth, slowly open his heart, and forgive himself. The house where the man lived was also an important symbol. Though simple and modest, it reflected a part of his soul. This house was not a place of joy, warmth, or comfort as he had imagined, but more like a shell. It was in this space that he had lived alone for so many years, facing wounds no one saw, no one knew. Yet, when the girl entered, the house was no longer empty. She didn't just bring life to the house, but to the man's soul. She didn't need to change anything, but her presence made this house a place that could hold love, acceptance, and healing. In my opinion, it is this setting and symbolism that make this story special and meaningful. The land, the house, and even the dusty paths leading to the farm are not just quiet backgrounds but reflect the psychological states of the characters. They are proof of solitude, of self-protection, and of the space where they learn to face the difficulties in life. The girl, in her moment of weakness, became the one to break that silence, bringing light to a dark space not through words or grand actions, but through her simple presence. The setting in the story is not just a place where the characters exist, but a part of them, like a mirror reflecting their souls. This story reminds me of an important lesson in life. Sometimes we cannot heal our wounds unless we dare to face ourselves and the things we've been through. And it's these seemingly simple settings, like the land or the house, that can be the place where we find peace, healing, and, most importantly, forgiveness for ourselves. As the relationship between the lonely man and the frail girl gradually blossomed, the houses, the dirt roads, and the vast land no longer stood simply as symbols of isolation. They slowly became crucial elements in determining the fate of both. However, peace did not last forever. Like in all stories, conflict is inevitable, and it is these challenges that mark a crucial turning point, altering both the characters and their relationship. The first conflict emerged when the girl, after spending days living with the man, began to confront the deep memories and wounds from her past. She was not only facing loneliness, but also psychological scars that had embedded themselves deep into her very being. On long nights, when she fell into uneasy sleep, she still dreamed of the past of those who had abandoned her, of the pain she could not forget. Their relationship, though initially grounded in mutual help, gradually grew more complex as secrets, fears, and suppressed emotions began to surface. The man, though he had tried to help her, could not escape the storms within his own heart. He had lived a life of isolation, devoid of communication or connection. The emotions he had never learned to face were now being challenged. He was not one to easily share his deepest feelings. As the girl began to open her heart, he realized that he, too, had to do so. But immediately, he encountered a large barrier: fear. He feared facing his own past, fearing that if he opened his heart, the old wounds would resurface. As their relationship began to unravel with these internal conflicts, the context of the land grew even more important. The man, so used to his closed-off life, was now forced to face emotions he could no longer hide. The vast land, no longer a place to escape, had become a space where he had to confront himself. The long nights on this land, once a place of refuge, now turned into a challenge to overcome his own limitations. It was a place that not only witnessed his loneliness but also became a witness to their efforts to overcome the wounds of both. The conflict arose not only from the outside but from within. The girl, although she had found comfort in the man's arms, was still haunted by the pain of the past, like a shadow that would not leave. The long nights weren't just personal nightmares, but moments when she felt alone even with someone by her side. She began to doubt whether this relationship could truly save her or whether, in the end, she would be abandoned again. The skepticism and fear, like a large shadow, threatened to cover up the progress they had made. Faced with these conflicts, they could not continue living in denial. Their meeting wasn't just a salvation for one by the other, but a salvation for themselves as individuals. The resolution didn't come from grand words or actions, but from patience and the willingness to open their hearts. Over time, the man learned to face the emotions he had long avoided. He began to share his painful memories about losses, wrong decisions, and the feeling of being abandoned that he had hidden for so many years. And the girl, with all her fragility, realized she wasn't the only one carrying wounds, and sometimes all it takes is one person to face the pain together for everything to become a little easier. In this resolution, the context and symbolism of the land became even more important. When the man faced his emotions, and the girl accepted that some wounds might never fully heal, but they couldn't control their fate, the vast land, with its open space, became the place where they found peace. The land was no longer a shelter, but a place that helped them understand that in the vastness of the world, only human connection could make them feel whole. This resolution wasn't an ending, but rather a new beginning, where they would continue facing challenges together. And it wasn't a personal victory, but the triumph of true love. From my perspective, this story reminds me that in life, conflict is not the worst thing. Sometimes, conflict is the opportunity for people to change, to confront the dark parts of their souls, and to understand the value of sharing and empathy. The relationship between the man and the girl is not the end of a difficult journey, but the opening of a new chapter, where they will continue to walk side by side. Truly, resolving conflicts isn't about solving problems easily. It's about overcoming them together, learning to accept, and growing from our pain. After much inner turmoil, conflicts that arose not only between the two characters, but also between the past and the present, between loneliness and the need for connection, the ending of the story is not the complete resolution of all issues. In fact, that ending isn't a perfect conclusion, but a moment that opens a new chapter full of hope and acceptance. Through challenges and setbacks, both characters not only found healing in each other, but also a rebirth of their own selves. The relationship between the lonely man and the frail girl is no longer one of dependency or salvation. It is a union of two people who have learned to accept the wounds in their hearts. The girl's appearance didn't just help the man rediscover the feeling of needing someone beside him, but also taught him how to face himself, how to open his heart, and accept emotions he had always avoided. Meanwhile, the girl, after years of enduring the cruelty of her past, also learned to stop letting her pain control her, and instead allowed love and empathy to be the forces that healed. The conclusion of the story is not one of a perfect life where all problems are fully resolved, but a reconciliation between the self and others. They are not perfect, and they do not demand perfection from each other. The key to healing lies in acceptance and patience. The girl is not the only reason to live for the man, and vice versa. What they give each other is not a promise or perfection, but presence, listening, and emotional sharing. The land they live on also becomes a symbol of rebirth and growth. Surrounded by the vastness and desolation of nature, where the girl and the man can no longer escape their wounds, they are forced to confront them. From a solitary, barren space, the land gradually becomes the place where the two begin to rebuild their lives. The land is not just where they live, but where they rekindle their trust in humanity. in connection, and, most importantly, in themselves. In that moment, they are no longer two lonely souls torn apart by pain, but individuals who know how to love and care for each other, cherishing each other's presence in life. In my personal view, this story sends a powerful message about healing through empathy and acceptance. The wounds each person carries cannot disappear just because we want to forget them, but can only heal when we dare to face them and allow ourselves to feel, share, and be shared with. The conclusion of the story is not a smooth ending, but it is the imperfection that makes the story profound. We often think that healing is a sudden process, as if there is some magic that makes everything perfect. But in reality, healing is a long journey, full of challenges, and sometimes slow steps, day by day, in acceptance and love. This story also reminds me that sometimes we need to learn to trust relationships, not because we need to be saved, but because we can create salvation for ourselves and for others. Real relationships are not those that are beautiful and perfect from the start, but those that are built over time, through patience and genuine sharing. The ending, therefore, is not the end of a journey, but a turning point to begin a new journey, where they will continue together, heal together, and most importantly, live genuinely together. The conclusion of the story is not just a stopping point, but a beginning, a turning point where both characters step out of their wounds, and together they move forward. The relationship between the lonely man and the frail girl is no longer a physical salvation, but a spiritual one, where both realize that only acceptance and empathy can help them overcome their pain. The conflicts that arose earlier, whether from within or between the two characters, have been resolved not through grand words, but through listening and genuine presence. They don't need perfection, just each other enough to heal old wounds and rebuild the missing pieces of their lives. What's important is not that they find an easy solution to every problem, but that they know how to face the pain and not let it control their lives. This story reminds us that sometimes we don't need to change ourselves or our circumstances completely, but just need an internal change, the willingness to open up and accept the wounds we carry. Each relationship is not about saving each other, but about creating space for each other to grow, to mature. So, what do you think about this journey of healing? Do you feel that relationships in life can truly help us overcome old wounds? Please leave your thoughts in the comments below the video. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss out on more inspiring stories. Thank you for watching and see you in the next videos.